The discovery. The vastness of space was quiet. It was always quiet, with only the hum of the engines and the occasional crackle of static to break the silence. But on this day, the crew of the Earth warship Vanguard would soon find themselves facing something that would shatter that quiet forever. It started with a signal, faint and distant, barely a whisper against the backdrop of deep space. Commander Sarah Blake stood in front of the main console, her eyes scanning the data coming in from the sensors. The ship was deep in uncharted space, far from the known galaxy. They were on a mission to map new star systems and scout potential resources for humanity's expanding reach. It was supposed to be a routine mission, one they had done hundreds of times before. "Anything new, Lieutenant?" Sarah asked, her voice calm, but with a hint of expectation. Lieutenant Ryan West, the ship's communications officer, had been tracking distant signals all day. He paused, looking up from his console, his face reflecting a mix of confusion and curiosity. "Commander, I think you should see this," he said, adjusting his seat. His fingers flew across the controls, and the screen in front of Sarah flickered. At first, it was just a blur of static. Then, slowly, a pattern started to emerge. "That's strange," Sarah muttered, leaning in. The signal was weak, fragmented, but it was unmistakably a signal. It wasn't just random noise. It was a transmission. "Is it an alien distress signal?" asked Ensign Marco Torres from the back of the bridge. His tone was curious, but Sarah could tell he was trying to hide the hint of excitement in his voice. Alien contact was a dream for many explorers, but Sarah wasn't so sure. "I don't know," she replied, her voice steady. "We've never picked up anything like this. It could be a trap." The crew had encountered strange things before: abandoned space stations, long-lost satellites, and unidentifiable debris. But this was different. The signal was too organized, too deliberate. The crew began to gather around the console, their eyes fixed on the image that slowly emerged from the static. It wasn't much at first, just a blur of gray shapes against a dark background. But as the ship moved closer, the shapes began to make sense. There it was, a massive ship. Its size was difficult to gauge, but it was clear that it was far larger than the Vanguard, much larger than anything humanity had ever constructed. It was old, battered, with signs of wear and tear. But despite its condition, there was something imposing about it, something powerful. It was almost as if the ship had been waiting, lying dormant for ages. "Are we sure this thing is abandoned?" Lieutenant West asked, his fingers tapping nervously on his console. "Let's find out," Sarah said, her voice firm. "Helmsman, get us closer. Let's take a closer look." The ship's engines hummed as the Vanguard moved forward, its course set toward the massive, ancient vessel that floated like a ghost in the emptiness of space. The crew watched in silence, the tension building as they drew closer. No one spoke. No one even breathed. As the distance between the two ships closed, Sarah's mind raced. What was this thing? Who had built it? And more importantly, why had it been left here, floating alone in the deep, cold void of space? She had no answers, but she could feel something inside her. Something telling her this wasn't a simple discovery. It was something much more. "Commander," West's voice cut through the quiet, bringing Sarah back to reality. "I'm getting strange readings. The ship's power levels are fluctuating. It's almost like it's still alive." "Alive?" Sarah repeated, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean by alive, Lieutenant?" "It's like the ship's energy field is reacting to us. It's—" West broke off as his hands moved frantically over the controls. "I can't explain it. It's as if it's aware of our presence." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. She had read about ancient technologies, weapons, and ships, but this was something else entirely. The energy readings were off the charts, fluctuating in patterns that didn't match anything the Vanguard sensors had ever recorded. "Steady, Lieutenant," Sarah ordered. "Get me a full scan." I want to know everything about this ship. Its energy, its composition, anything. West worked quickly, his fingers dancing across the controls, pulling up data as fast as he could. The ship's scan results started to appear on the main screen. At first glance, it appeared to be an abandoned vessel, old and damaged, drifting in space like some forgotten relic. But as the scan deepened, more unsettling details emerged. "This is not possible," West muttered, his voice low with disbelief. "The ship's material composition, it's not anything we've ever encountered. And there's something inside it. Something alive." "What are you saying?" Sarah demanded, her voice sharp now. "Are you telling me there's something alive inside that ship?" "I don't know, Commander, but the readings are clear. There's something. I can't get a clear picture, but I feel it's watching us." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. A strange, uneasy feeling settled over her. She had trained her whole life to lead missions like this, but she had never faced something like this before. The crew looked at one another, their faces reflecting the same mixture of awe and fear. They were standing on the brink of something unknown, something terrifying. The screen flickered again, and for just a moment, the image of the ship changed. A flash of something. An insignia, perhaps. A symbol appeared on the screen. It was gone as quickly as it had come, but not before Sarah had seen it. A dark, angular shape, a symbol that sent a shiver through her. It looked almost like a warning. "Get us out of here," she ordered suddenly. But it was too late. The ship's systems hummed louder, and the Vanguard began to lose control. The ancient ship wasn't just a relic. It was something far more dangerous, and they had just woken it up. The moment the ancient ship began to stir, it was as though the entire universe held its breath. The Vanguard shuddered, the power systems flickering as if reacting to an unseen force. Sarah Blake's hands tightened around the arms of her chair, her heart pounding in her chest. The calm and calculated air that had once filled the bridge was now replaced by a palpable tension. Every member of the crew was silent, their eyes locked on the displays, unsure of what to expect next. "Commander," Lieutenant West said in a shaky voice, his eyes glued to his console, "the energy fluctuations. They're off the scale. I've never seen anything like this. It's like it's alive." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The ship, this ancient vessel, wasn't just an artifact. It wasn't just abandoned. It was far more dangerous than they had ever anticipated. And it was reacting to them, to their presence. "Lieutenant, what are we looking at?" Sarah's voice was steady, though the unease gnawing at her made it hard to maintain control. "How far are we from it?" "We're too close now, Commander," West replied, still working frantically at his console. "We're already inside the outer boundary of the ship's electromagnetic field. If we back out now, we might trigger something catastrophic." "Do we have any control?" Sarah asked, her eyes narrowing as she studied the displays. The ship's scanners were still trying to process the signals, but it was like trying to read a book written in a language no one had ever seen before. "Just barely," West said. "But it's getting harder to maintain course. It's almost like we're locked in." "Can you override it?" Sarah barked. She wasn't about to let an ancient alien ship control her ship, not without a fight. West's fingers moved quickly, his face a mask of concentration. "I'm trying, but the ship's systems, whatever they are interfering with our control. It's like the ship is aware of us. It's almost like it's testing us." Sarah's mind raced as she turned to the rest of her crew. Her instincts screamed that this was no ordinary ship. They were standing on the precipice of something far more terrifying, something that could very well be humanity's undoing if they weren't careful. Yet, her rational mind also told her that backing off now could mean losing the opportunity of a lifetime. They could uncover a whole new chapter of galactic history, one that no human had ever seen before. But Sarah was no fool. She had learned to trust her gut, and her gut was telling her that they were dangerously close to something far beyond their understanding. "Status report," she ordered. "We've lost most of our control, Commander," Ensign Marco Torres called out from his station. His voice was tight with worry. "We're being pulled toward the ship's docking bay. Whatever is affecting us, it's too strong." "Commander," Lieutenant West said, his voice tinged with panic. "The ship, it's opening up. The docking bay doors, they are activating. The ship is calling us in." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. This was it. The ancient ship was about to reveal its secrets, but she didn't know if the crew would survive to tell the tale. Every part of her told her to be cautious, to retreat before they were trapped inside this vast unknown. But the lure of discovery, of what they could learn, was powerful. "Prepare to board," Sarah ordered, her voice low and firm. "But make no mistake, we don't know what we're walking into. Stay alert. Everyone, to your stations. This could be our first contact." The tension on the bridge was suffocating. Everyone moved, but there was no certainty in their actions. They were heading into the unknown, into a vessel that had been abandoned, or so they thought, for centuries, maybe even millennia. And they had no idea what it would hold. Outside, the Vanguard was drawn closer to the alien ship. The docking bay doors loomed larger, their massive bulk opening slowly, almost invitingly. But Sarah had no illusions. There was no invitation here, only an ancient unknown force that they had dared to awaken. The ship's power systems hummed with an eerie, almost rhythmic pulse. The sound vibrated through the walls, seeping into the bones of every crew member. It was as though the ship itself was alive, breathing, waiting for something. "We're in," Marco Torres reported, his voice tight with disbelief. "Lock down all external hatches," Sarah ordered. "No one leaves this ship until we know what we're dealing with." The Vanguard moved slowly into the docking bay, its thrusters working against the pull of the alien vessel. The bay was dark, eerily quiet. The vastness of it was overwhelming. There were no lights, no signs of life. The only illumination came from the faint glow of the Vanguard's exterior lights and the pulsing energy that seemed to radiate from the walls of the alien ship. Sarah watched as the Vanguard inched forward. The bay seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. It was clear that this wasn't just a ship. It was a fortress, a vessel designed for something far grander than the Vanguard could ever hope to be. "Commander, I'm reading something strange," West said. His voice trembled slightly, and Sarah turned to him. "The scan just came back, and the whole bay is alive with energy. It's like it's aware of us. I don't understand it." Sarah felt her gut tighten. There it was again. That sensation that they weren't alone, that they were being watched. But by what? And for how long? Before Sarah could respond, the ship shook. It wasn't a violent shake, but it was enough to send a ripple of concern through the crew. "Brace for impact," Sarah shouted, grabbing onto her console as the ship shuddered again. Outside, a door slid open, massive, imposing, and ancient. As it revealed the inner depths of the alien ship, it wasn't just a door, it was a gateway. And what lay beyond it would change everything. The crew was about to find out just how much danger they had walked into. This was no ordinary mission. The stakes had just been raised, and they were about to uncover the nightmare that lay inside. The air inside the alien ship felt thick, unnaturally still, as if time itself had slowed down. The crew of the Vanguard filed cautiously into the docking bay, each step echoing in the cavernous, hollow expanse. It was as though they had crossed into a place that hadn't seen life for centuries, if not millennia. There was no hum of energy, no signs of life, just cold, oppressive silence. "Commander, you need to see this." Lieutenant West's voice broke the silence, and Sarah turned toward him, already knowing that something was wrong. The walls of the docking bay were covered with strange symbols, etched deep into the surface. They shimmered faintly, casting an eerie light that shifted and flickered, almost like they were alive. It was impossible to understand what they meant. No human language could explain this. Sarah approached them, running her fingers lightly over the symbols, feeling the cool metal beneath her touch. There was a faint vibration coming from the walls, almost imperceptible, but it was there. It was as though the ship itself was responding to their presence. This feels wrong," West muttered, his face pale as he examined the symbols. "Like it's trying to communicate. But with what?" "Stay focused, Lieutenant," Sarah said, though her own unease was starting to grow. There was something about this place, something ancient and dangerous, that didn't sit right with her. "Commander," came the voice of Marco Torres, his voice carrying a hint of fear. "The scanners are picking up movement. It's faint, but it's there. Something, or someone, is on board." "Can you get a visual?" Sarah asked, her hand instinctively going to her sidearm. The place was so eerily silent that even the faintest noise sent a chill down her spine. "Negative," Torres replied, shaking his head. "Whatever it is, it's not showing up on the visual feeds. It's like it's hiding, almost, masking itself." "Then it's a matter of time before we find out what it is," Sarah said, her tone firm, though she couldn't shake the feeling that they had just made the worst mistake of their lives. "Keep moving. We're not leaving until we know what we're dealing with." The crew continued to make their way deeper into the heart of the alien ship. The atmosphere grew colder the further they moved, and the silence became more oppressive. It was as though they were walking through a tomb, and every step they took disturbed the slumber of something that had been hidden for far too long. As they navigated through the dimly lit corridors, they came upon a large chamber. It was vast, larger than any room they had ever seen, filled with strange, organic-looking machinery. The walls were lined with what appeared to be glowing tubes, and the floor was covered in a slick, dark substance that reflected the eerie light from above. There was a sense of foreboding in the air, a weight that pressed down on them, as though the ship was holding its breath, waiting for something. "This is incredible," West said, his voice hushed with awe. "It's like we found the heart of the ship. But this is not just a ship, it's something more." Sarah nodded, her eyes scanning the room. There was no denying it. The ship's technology, whatever it was far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered, and yet there was something unsettling about it. The design of the room was too perfect, too precise. It didn't feel like it had been built for humans or any species they could understand. "Commander," Torres spoke again, his voice tight with fear. "I'm picking up more movement. It's closer now. I think it's in the walls." Sarah's pulse quickened. She had hoped they could explore the ship without encountering whatever lay within, but it seemed that hope was fading fast. They had been warned by the strange energy signatures, but they hadn't heeded the signs. Now they were deep inside, and it was clear that they had awoken something ancient, something that didn't want to be found. "Lieutenant West, get to the main console. I want to know everything about this ship," Sarah ordered. "Marco, you stay on high alert. Everyone else, keep your eyes open." The crew spread out, moving cautiously through the chamber. The strange machinery seemed to pulse with life, as if it were reacting to their presence. The deeper they went, the more disorienting the environment became. The air felt heavier, thicker, and the walls seemed to close in on them, making it difficult to breathe. Without warning, the lights flickered. The low hum of the ship grew louder, vibrating through the floor beneath them. It was as though the ship was waking up, its systems coming online, reacting to their intrusion. "Commander," West's voice was sharp now. "I got something. The ship's core. It's here. It's not just energy. It's..." Suddenly, a loud clang echoed through the room. The crew froze, every muscle tense. Something moved in the shadows, too fast to be seen clearly. It was there, but it wasn't. It was a blur, a shifting, flickering shape that darted between the pillars of alien machinery. The crew couldn't get a clear visual, but they could feel its presence, like a dark cloud, closing in on them. "Did you see that?" Torres asked, his voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, the flickering shape materialized into a shadowy figure, tall and alien, its form obscured by the dim light. It stood motionless, watching them. Its eyes, if it even had eyes, were glowing faintly, and the air seemed to thrum with an unnatural energy. The crew instinctively took a step back. Sarah raised her weapon, but the creature did not move. It simply stared at them, as though it was waiting for something. "What the hell is that?" West whispered, his voice barely audible. Sarah's mind raced. There was no time to figure it out, no time to analyze. Their scanners had missed this presence, the thing that had been hiding inside the walls. It was clear now that this was no mere relic. The ship, whatever it was alive, and whatever it had been hiding for centuries was now awake. "Stay calm," Sarah ordered, her voice steady despite the growing tension. "We're going to find out what it wants, together." But deep down, Sarah knew that they had just crossed a line. They had awoken something, and now there was no going back. Whatever was inside the ship was no longer hiding in the shadows. It was ready to confront them. And they weren't prepared for what was coming next. The nightmare had only just begun. The air inside the alien ship had turned thick and cold, an unnerving stillness weighing heavily on the crew. Sarah felt it in her bones. The entity, whatever it was, stood motionless before them, an ominous presence that made every muscle in her body tense. The eerie, glowing eyes of the creature pierced through the dim light, staring directly at the crew, as if weighing them, studying them. "Stay still. Don't provoke it," Sarah whispered, barely audible. Her grip on her weapon tightened, though she wasn't sure it would do much good against something so alien, so unpredictable. The crew stood frozen, their breath visible in the frigid air. The only sound in the room was the distant hum of the ship, now more pronounced, as though the structure itself was alive and waking. The ship's walls seemed to pulse in rhythm with the creature's movements, but Sarah couldn't be sure. It was as if everything was synchronized, an ancient dance between the ship and its unseen inhabitants. Sarah felt the weight of the situation crushing her, the pressure building in her chest. She had been trained for this. The unknown, the unexplainable, the hostile environments. They were all part of the job, but nothing had prepared her for this. Nothing had prepared her for the dark, unblinking eyes of the creature in front of them. Slowly, the alien shifted, its body elongating in an unnatural way. It wasn't like anything Sarah had ever seen before. It had no mouth, no ears, no recognizable facial features, only those glowing eyes that seemed to burn through her very soul. As the creature moved, the ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble, as if it was alive, responding to its every motion. And then, without warning, the ship came to life. The walls around them began to hum with an intensity that made the air vibrate, a strange resonance filling the room. The glowing tubes that lined the walls flickered violently, their light casting odd shadows that danced across the chamber. The ship was waking up, and it was angry. "What's happening?" West's voice was high with panic. He stepped back, his eyes darting around the room, trying to make sense of the chaotic scene unfolding in front of him. "We're not alone," Sarah replied, her voice low and steady despite the rising panic in her chest. She didn't know what the creature was, but she knew one thing for certain: it was not going to let them leave unscathed. The creature finally moved. It shifted with terrifying speed, closing the distance between it and the crew in an instant. The light from the glowing symbols reflected off its smooth, dark body, making it look even more otherworldly, more menacing. Sarah instinctively raised her weapon, her heart pounding in her chest. But she knew she was too slow. It was already too close. Before she could even react, the alien was upon them. Its limbs, long and thin, reached out with an unnatural precision. In one swift motion, it disarmed Sarah, knocking her weapon to the floor. The others fared no better. The creature was upon them in a blur, its movements impossibly fast. Every strike, every motion, was calculated and precise, as if it had done this before, many times. Sarah's mind raced. She could feel the cold, harsh metal beneath her fingertips as she tried to regain her bearings, but it was no use. The creature was everywhere, moving too fast to be followed. She tried to push herself up, but her limbs felt heavy, her movements sluggish. The ship's strange energy seemed to weigh her down, making it hard to focus, hard to think. "Commander, we need to fall back," Marco shouted, his voice filled with desperation. He was already backing away, dragging West with him. The alien didn't seem to care. It only had eyes for Sarah. "No," Sarah snapped, her voice sharp. She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to let this creature, whatever it was, take control of them. They had come this far, and she wasn't about to give up now. "We fight. We don't retreat." The creature paused, as if considering her words, and then, without warning, it lunged. But just as quickly, something shifted. The hum of the ship grew louder, more intense, and the air itself seemed to crackle with energy. Sarah could feel it, could feel the ship reacting to the presence of the creature, as if it was bound to it in some way. It was as though the ship itself had a will, an ancient purpose that was only now beginning to reveal itself. In an instant, the walls around them seemed to shift, the entire room bending, warping as though the ship was folding in on itself. The creature hesitated, its attention diverted for a split second. Sarah seized the opportunity. "Now," she shouted. She pushed herself to her feet and fired a quick burst at the creature. It didn't flinch, but it did pause, turning its glowing eyes toward her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. The air crackled, and then, as if realizing the danger, the creature shrank back into the shadows, retreating deeper into the ship. "Move," Sarah ordered, motioning for her crew to follow. They didn't need to be told twice. They ran, their footsteps pounding against the cold, hard floor as they made their way back toward the entrance. The ship seemed to respond, the walls closing in on them, the passageways narrowing, as though the ship was alive and trying to prevent their escape. "Keep going," Sarah shouted, her voice sharp as she led the way. They couldn't stop now. They couldn't afford to hesitate. Whatever the creature was, it had been waiting for them, and now it was more dangerous than ever. They reached the docking bay just as the ship began to shake, the walls vibrating violently as the creature let out a deafening screech. It was a sound unlike anything they had ever heard, sharp, piercing, filled with an inhuman rage. They had to get out before it was too late. But as they made their way to the exit, Sarah glanced back over her shoulder. The creature was there, waiting in the shadows, its glowing eyes fixed on them. It wasn't done yet, and neither was the ship. The nightmare had just begun. The docking bay doors slammed shut with a resounding clang, sealing the crew inside the ship's dimly lit hangar. Sarah's heart raced as the adrenaline that had been coursing through her veins now mixed with a rising tide of dread. The echo of the creature's screech reverberated throughout the entire ship, and she could feel the floor beneath her feet tremble, as if the very walls of the vessel were alive, mourning the loss of its prey, or preparing for another hunt. "Where are the others?" Marco's voice broke through the tension, his tone a mix of panic and disbelief. He turned to Sarah, searching her face for answers, but she had none to give. "I don't know," she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos that raged within her mind. The crew had split up, each of them seeking their own escape, but the ship had different plans. The exits had all been locked, and the entire vessel seemed to have come alive, actively trapping them inside. "Sarah, we can't stay here," Marco urged, his hand gripping her shoulder. His breath was quick, shallow. The fear was setting in. Sarah could see it in his eyes. They were trapped in a maze of metal and shadows, and they had no idea what was lurking just beyond the walls. "We need to find a way to communicate with the fleet," Sarah said, her gaze scanning the room. She didn't know if the rest of their crew was alive, but she knew one thing for certain. They were in a race against time. Whatever the creature was, it had far more power than they had anticipated. And now, The ship itself seemed to be turning against them. She motioned for Marco to follow her, leading the way through the cluttered hangar. Every creak of the walls and every flicker of light made her nerves jump, but she couldn't afford to panic. She had led missions like this before, into hostile environments, into the unknown. But this was something far worse, something ancient, something that had been waiting for them. As they moved deeper into the bowels of the ship, Sarah felt the presence of the creature again, like a heavy shadow lurking just behind her, watching them. She didn't need to see it to know it was there. She could feel its gaze, its cold, predatory intent. Where the hell is the comms room? Marco's voice was tight with frustration. He was clearly on edge, but Sarah didn't have time to comfort him. They had to focus on survival. Straight ahead, she said, her eyes scanning the eerie corridors. The walls here seemed to close in around them, the hallway narrowing as they walked, and the air grew colder with every step they took. The ship seemed to respond to their movement, and she had a sinking feeling that it wasn't just a matter of them being trapped. They were being hunted. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed down the hallway. Marco froze, his eyes wide with alarm. What was that? Sarah didn't answer. She motioned for him to stay quiet. The sound had come from behind them, a heavy, dragging noise that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. The creature was getting closer. Without warning, the lights flickered and went out. For a moment, they were plunged into darkness. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as her hand instinctively went to her side, her fingers brushing the cold metal of her weapon. But it was useless. The creature had already proven that it was faster, stronger. Their only hope was to find a way out. "Stay close," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. She took a step forward, guided only by the faint red emergency lights that blinked weakly in the distance. The darkness was oppressive, the silence deafening, and every footstep they took seemed to echo louder than the last. The only sound now was the distant hum of the ship, growing louder and more aggressive, almost as if it were responding to the danger within it. The air felt charged, heavy, alive. And then they heard it, a faint clicking noise, like claws scraping against metal. It was behind them. Marco whirled around, his weapon raised. "What the hell is that?" he shouted, but his voice broke off in terror as he saw the shape in the darkness. The creature's glowing eyes pierced through the blackness, like twin suns, burning with malevolent hunger. The creature moved forward, its limbs elongating unnaturally as it closed in on them. It was silent now, too quiet, and its form seemed to flicker in and out of existence, shifting between shadows and light. It was no longer a mere figure. It was a nightmare made flesh, a living entity that bent the very rules of reality. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. She couldn't think. There was only fight or flight. But she wasn't going to run. "Run!" she shouted at Marco, but it was too late. The creature lunged. Sarah fired first, a burst of laser fire lighting up the darkened hallway. It missed by a fraction, and the creature disappeared, its body flickering into thin air. She couldn't track its movements anymore. It wasn't like anything they had ever encountered. It wasn't just a creature. It was something otherworldly. In that instant, the air crackled with energy. The ship trembled once again, a sharp tremor running through the metal. Marco stumbled, almost losing his footing, but Sarah caught him. The ship's defensive systems had been triggered. The walls around them shifted, and a loud mechanical sound filled the air as the floor beneath them gave way. The two of them barely managed to catch themselves as they were thrust into another section of the ship. Sarah's mind raced. There was no more time to waste. They couldn't survive on the run. They had to fight back, somehow. They needed to get to the ship's command center, where they could access the weapons systems, or they would be doomed. But they had no idea what horrors awaited them in the depths of the ship. The creature wasn't the only thing they had to fear. The ship was changing, evolving, reacting to their every move. The nightmare wasn't just outside. It was inside them now.